Welcome back to this episode of the Hardscape Huddle. I'm your host, Kyle Staffa, and today we have an exciting show with the NFIB ladies here. Sitting across from me, we have Bre and Eileen. It's a pleasure. I look forward to this episode as this may be one of our biggest episodes yet, so thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having us, Kyle.
Kyle, we're thrilled to be here.
Thank you, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to travel here. The NFIB, in my opinion, is a pretty big deal for small business throughout New Jersey, at least.
And I'd just like to start by saying NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Businesses. We represent the small businesses. We are Main Street. We are what keeps the economic engine in New Jersey running, small businesses.
Yeah, we like to say that we're the voice of small business. Our mission is to help small and independent business owners grow and operate their business. So we actually are active in all 50 states and in Washington, D.C. as well.
Oh, wow. So basically what I'm hearing is the NFIB is working for the businesses, of course, and anybody can become a member. Doesn't matter the size of your business, correct?
Well, you do have to be small or independent. We operate on the SBA definition of 500 or fewer employees. However, our average member has 10 to 11 employees. So when we say small business, we really do mean small business.
Yeah, and that's perfect. That's most of our listeners and our viewers. We're blue-collar guys and girls, and especially in the hardscape, the construction industry. And I thought it was important to have you ladies on today to discuss how you help small independent businesses. I know there's a couple things we want to get into, a couple topics we want to touch base on. But before we get into that, tell me about the dynamics of the NFIB and like how it gets funded or how the memberships work, because I'd like to get some listeners to join and strengthen this organization.
Yeah, we're always in for new members. We are currently about 300,000 members strong across the United States, and we operate on a one member, one vote kind of policy. So we send policy guidelines out to members every year. How do I want to say that?
We send ballot questions out to our membership, and they're really the questions are written on the hot topics of the moment. So we try to tie the ballot questions into legislation that's going to impact our members. And remember, our members are really diversified. So it's not, we are contractor heavy. So your listening audience, your membership ties really well into what we do. We're also the florists, the dry cleaners, the restaurants, the Main Street bar, the independent bodega. We're those little guys, and we really are the only organization that is the umbrella that brings everybody together.
Yeah, and that is a great thing.
But back to the ballot question, I went and I zigzagged. So we come up with really hot topics. So last year, for example, we had a ballot question to our membership. How do you feel about New Jersey's mandate? There's legislation to mandate that only electric leaf blowers can be used in New Jersey. And our membership responded overwhelmingly saying, we oppose. And for a variety of reasons. Electric is expensive. Electric gas blowers are 20 times the price of a gas blower. Our members are okay with restricted hours as to when noise can be created from blowers, but not for an outright ban on.
Right. And when you say electric blowers, you mean battery powered as well as plug in, right?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. And I'm totally with you on that. I don't know that the government should be telling me or what equipment I can use in my business. I agree with the noise and things like that. I only get one day off a week like many of our viewers do, and it's typically late Saturday or Sunday. So I don't want to go home and sit out back and listen to the leaf blower as well. I get it. But we have a short outside expectancy here in New Jersey with 4 seasons and what have you. But again, about your ballot question, I also just received an email, and you keep your members up to date of what's going on.
And that's Bre. Bre does an amazing job. Before Bre answers your question and jumps in and talking about grassroots, because that's the strength of this organization, is our membership and uniting and creating that single voice. I am the state lobbyist, so I am state director / lobbyist. So I am in Trenton, and I am the one who flags everything that's going on in Trenton. So almost any email I do, any correspondence I have with our team at NFIB, Bre is CC'd, because Bre is she is the spoke that makes the whole engine run, because she is in contact and communications and activating our membership.
So I guess I didn't realize I have the NFIB leaders all in one room today who are really making it listen to us.
Eileen might be overselling me a little bit here. I'm the grassroots manager for NFIB in New Jersey. And so my role is really to amplify that voice of small business. So I put members like you in contact with your legislators, other decision makers, with our lobbyists. And we do have an Eileen in every state house. So we have a lobbyist in every state house, all 50 states, as well as a federal team in DC. And then we advocate. So my department and my role is to make sure that business owners are hearing legislators, are hearing directly from business owners. I always say, I'm talking to people like you day in and day out, but I don't own a small business. I'm not in the trenches. I'm not going through all of the hurdles that you guys have to overcome. The struggles every day. Right? And so we can spout statistics and we can share, anecdotes here and there with lawmakers, but having that voice directly from somebody going through it is incredibly powerful. So we know that you all are the issue experts, right? You're the one that's facing all of these challenges day in and day out. And while we can do our best to empathize and sympathize, we're not going through it personally. So my role is really to make sure that that personal story, exactly what you're going through every single day, is heard loud in Trenton, is heard loud in DC, and then hopefully we can enact change and support small business owners using those stories and using that voice.
Wow.
An example is last night. So I'm plugged into the New Jersey legislature. So I get emails to let me know that bad legislation, I flag legislation that I deem hurtful to NFIB members. And so I got an email last night at around 5:30 stating that the Senate Labor Committee was going to be in on Monday. And so it's Thursday night and they're announcing they're going to be in on Monday.
Is that normal that they're in on Monday?
Yes, they're in on Mondays and Thursdays. So Bre and I, other than email, we haven't really even had a chance to talk about this yet. But they're posting a bill that is going to require all contractors. And the word contractor is very broad. So if you're a stonemason or a carpenter, or you put up the walls, or you do the fire alarm system, this legislation is going to impact you. And it's creating, with an appropriation of $2 million, a new department at the New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce that is going to require you, in order to be a business, to pay not a license, because you already have your license. This is called a registration fee. So you are going to have to register yourself and every employee in your business. And that fee is $750. To me, this isn't a registration fee. This is a new tax on small contractors. And Kyle, I can tell you where this is coming from, because right now the legislature in New Jersey is very pro-union. And I think this is just another push by unions to make it more complicated, more expensive to be an independent contractor, an independent building trades person. I think what I find really scary about this, it's another opportunity. Don't you have aren't there enough ways that the Department of Labor has you under a magnifying glass checking to make sure, are you paying that sales tax on the flooring that you bought? You have to pay a sales tax on flooring. They have a microscope on you already. And this is another opportunity to get into your business and say, so you're not registered.
If I'm the contractor, I have to be sitting home watching this thinking, well, what do I get for the $750? And then I obviously have to maintain it, because if I have to register my 10 employees, what happens if one leaves me? Then I've got to get that person off so he's no longer registered to me. So it sounds like it's even more work for me. And then I guess the question would be, what do they plan on doing with the $750 per contractor, where we don't know yet?
It will go towards, it's a great question. The way it's written is it's going to go towards the general budget of the Department of Labor. So it is a tax. It's not,
big question
let's
mark.
not call it registration. It is a tax. And when I'm
Yes.
testifying against this bill on behalf of NFIB members, I am going to call this a tax, not a registration.
On previous podcasts, we've talked about the costs of doing business and how to recoup the overhead of doing business. So now we have to add that into the bottom line if you're a contractor in New Jersey. So if we can do 100 jobs, we have to break that $750 down per 100 jobs per year. So just keep that in mind, guys.
I think that's really what the legislators forget, is that every cost that you push onto a business, ultimately it goes back to the consumer.
And consumer, yeah.
And
Right.
so why is New Jersey the most expensive state in the country to be a small business person, to live? It's because of ideas, the rules, the regulations that are continually piled on.
Yeah. I mean, well, thank you for fighting against that. I hope you succeed in that. The likelihood of this passing on Monday?
Very high.
There's a lot of support for it.
The way the legislature works, because it is the Democrats are in the majority, they have more members on the Senate Labor Committee than the Republicans. And certainly we're not here to talk politics, to talk about specific Democrats and Republicans, but there's also a kumbaya that because a Democrat is sponsoring this bill, the other Democrats don't want to hurt that legislator's feeling, that
Right.
senator's feeling, so they're not going to vote against
Even
it.
if they think it's wrong.
Even if they think it's wrong. But what happens, why it's really important at this step of the process to oppose a bill strongly and to share negative ideas, especially, I love how you pointed out what happens when an employee leaves and I've already paid.
Mhm.
It points out to them, wow, this idea that sounded so nebulous is a lot more involved than we thought.
And we see that a lot with legislators. Something that we always try to explain to them is small business is not a smaller version of big business. It's not an economies of scale situation. We oftentimes see legislation promoted that, oh, it's, one form, it's going to take 10 minutes a year. It's one fee or tax, it's going to be $750 a year. And while your big businesses may be able to absorb that or push the form off onto an HR department, we know most small businesses, you don't have general counsel in-house. You might not have a dedicated HR professional in-house. You likely don't have an accountant in-house.
Correct.
And so you're having to outsource all of these new legal requirements or risk being non-compliant because you're trying to do your job as a small business owner.
Yeah. A lot of our listeners, like you said, they are spending 50% of their time working on their business and the other 50% of their time in their business where they're out in the field making sure either the blueprints are being read correctly or they're even laying block and, framing that house themselves.
Right. And we try to fight for fewer regulations so you have more time to be in your business, doing your job, doing the work that you wanted to do, why you became an entrepreneur and a small business owner in the first place, right? Cutting through that red tape, going through your stack and stack and stack of forms that only take 10 minutes, but there are 300 of them.
Yeah.
So,
when I started Staff of Stone, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but I thought we would be successful. I knew I would be successful, and we grew. Thank you to COVID. We grew a lot quicker in our industry. We weren't shut down like a lot of hospitality and restaurant eateries and things like that.
sure.
We grew very substantially. And now I say to the guys, I never thought it would take me away from the sales desk and outside moving material by hand. Like now I just spend most of my time doing exactly what you just said, Bre, making sure we're doing all the right things for the township, local government, for the state government. Then did I file my 2290s for fuel and all of that for the big trucks. It's become a full-time 50-hour-a-week, job for me.
Kyle,
Right.
I can't help but jump in and talk about another piece of legislation that was introduced last week. This legislation is deemed employees' right to time off. And the concept is that each employer will have to have a written plan as to when they are permitted to contact their employee electronically.
It gives employees the right to disconnect.
Yes.
So if you were to, say, message one of your guys in the field after hours, he would have the right under this legislation to ignore that message until he was back on the clock.
So can you imagine if it happens to be a Saturday afternoon and you stopped working at noon officially, but you are working on some papers and you don't understand what something means, and you pick up the call and nobody answers your call. You go back to work on Monday. Hey, what? Did you get my voice message?
Right.
It's been bothering me all weekend. I got to figure this out. I don't have to answer your question. I'm not working. Isn't that terrible? And that's not what small businesses are about. We learn how to communicate with each other.
And the important caveat here, too, is you can be fined. There are fines attached to this legislation where if an employer continuously contacts an employee outside of whatever the stipulated working hours are.
So I'm glad Bre brought that up. I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm going to touch on that in a second. So going back to this time off policy thing, my HR person, who also does payroll, and she's also known as my wife.
Very common.
Very common in small business, right?
Yeah.
What happens so we have digital time in ADP, digital time in, everybody logs on their phone, they hit go, and they're on the clock at that point. So what happens on Sunday when my wife is doing payroll and you forgot to punch out? But it's your time off, right?
Well,
you don't have to answer my text.
That means you're just not going to get paid. Because,
I like it.
Yeah. That's a great example.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And then getting back to the tax of being a business owner, being fortunate enough to be a business owner, and the $750 registration tax, we'll call it. On the flip side of that is, what is the penalty for the companies that don't register that business? We have that now, that they don't have contractor license. But now if I don't register my business, what is the fine if you catch me?
Yes. The fines are part of the legislation as high as $10,000 and per violation. So that could quickly multiply to be a really steep penalty.
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But again, if they're not registered, they don't have a contractor's license, there's a good chance, or maybe this is a better question to ask on Monday, if you don't mind, is how are you going to find the companies that didn't register?
I'm going to make a note on that.
I appreciate that. Because there's, for example, tree guys that cut trees, they have to be registered. They have to have special licenses and things like that. But I believe there's a law out there, or maybe it's in the sprinkler industry. I'm not quite sure. And nobody checks on them. There's no government regulation on checking on these guys to see if they're installing outdoor sprinklers properly or with this special license. And it makes the guys that run legit, that have these licenses, it makes them frustrated because they paid their dues. They paid their X amount of dollars to have that license, and nothing ever happens to the guys that don't.
Sure.
So I think that's a really good point to highlight.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, this idea of this tax is just 100% wrong.
I don't disagree. The NFIB sends out emails continuously, and I actually read them all, believe it or not.
Thank you.
No, you guys do a great job to try to keep us informed. It's now our obligation to open those and read them, and we can not, or we should.
And there's a bit of a science backing that up, or great brains have decided how this should best be done. But the intent is not to overwhelm you. I do know there are certain organizations you may belong to, and you may get 3 emails a day, and sometimes it's just too much. So we try to be reasonable in how often we do get in touch, because when we get in touch, we want you to read them because it's important.
Exactly. Yeah. We're very proud of not spamming our members. When we send regular newsletters and updates about what's going on in New Jersey, what's going on in Washington, and then those one-off emails when we do need you to do something for us, right? We call those action alerts. We ask you to send a message to your lawmaker. We may ask you to attend an event. We may ask you to, sign your name to an op-ed. Those one-offs, when we're sending them like that, are truly important because we need to hear your voice.
And perhaps since you mentioned that great word, Washington, it would be a good opportunity to jump in and just talk about what's going on in terms of a small business tax in Washington, D.C.
Maybe that is what I was getting at here. So in my email on September 23rd, I received an email about a small business tax deduction. I guess is that what you were going to say?
Yes, that's what I was going to talk about, Kyle.
So I guess this was put into legislation or into law back in 2017, it looks like.
Yeah, when Donald Trump was president, it became law.
Okay. And I would assume he put this in the law to probably stimulate the economy and get it really pumping.
Yeah, also to create fairness. And I think let's give the credit where the credit is due to our great lobbyists in Washington, D.C., because Donald Trump was, when he was president, he was promoting a rollback on the corporate business tax, which wouldn't have helped small businesses. It was really, let's help big business. But we all know that the backbone of America, the American economy, is small businesses. So through NFIB's great efforts, a 20% deduction was added to compensate small businesses. But the 20% deduction is set to expire in 2025.
Yeah, correct. Eileen's absolutely right. NFIB was instrumental in getting this deduction on the books, really to level the playing field between small and big business. We know if the small business economy in America was part of the world economy, it would be the 6th largest economy in the world.
That's mind-blowing. The
It is.
6th largest. Isn't that mind-blowing?
We know small business really is driving the economy. And so getting this deduction in place for over 30 million small business owners was crucial in 2017. And I know carried quite a few businesses through COVID. I've heard from members that have used this deduction to stay afloat, to invest in capital gains, to reward their employees, hire employees, to cover rising healthcare benefits, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Just across the board, this deduction has been crucial to many, many small business owners. Eileen mentioned it is set to expire at the end of 2025. This is NFIB's #1 advocacy priority until that time. We are fighting to make this deduction permanent.
Yeah, I mean, we really need it to be permanent, quite honestly. So whatever you can do, but more importantly, if we can get some folks that are listening today to join the NFIB to help this fight, and it's only going to benefit you. So let me back this up even a little bit further before we continue to talk on this tax deduction. Is the NFIB runs on donations, does it not?
That's correct. We're a member-based organization. We are not funded by large corporations or any individual. So when a business becomes a member, they pay membership dues. It's a pretty reasonable amount annually, and they are capped at a certain point. So no one business is writing us a huge check to sway influence over our organization, right? Our average member is a few $100 a year, right?
And they get to in my case, they get to dictate what they send. So
that's correct.
You send what you can.
Your membership dues work for you within your budget. Absolutely. And like I mentioned earlier, we operate on a one member, one vote type of policy. So when we send those ballots out or when we ask you about priorities, each member, each business gets one say. They're either for it, they're against it, right? And then the majority of whichever side is in the majority, that dictates whether we support a bill or oppose a bill.
And I wanted to bring that up so the viewers that are tuning in today don't think that to join the NFIB, it's thousands. I must have to write a check for $10,000, and I just don't have that.
Right.
No, I mean, it's, I think the first year I joined up was maybe $100 or $150. It wasn't very much. Now, through some success, and I get to see what the NFIB does for me, I've been able to donate a little bit more. But it's never, oh, here's your envelope, please fill out a check for $500. It's never that.
Right.
It's not a gym membership of X amount of dollars per month and, what have you. I just want to point that out and make that clear.
Yeah, absolutely. And we really do represent the small businesses. So it's important to us that membership is feasible, that your voice is being heard. And we know, like, you guys are going through it right now, right? Especially in the state of New Jersey. Things are tough. Inflation's up. Everything's up across the board. We view NFIB as an investment in your business, right? We know, like I said earlier, you don't have HR, you don't have general counsel, you don't have a lobbyist in-house,
but we do need a voice.
But you do need a voice. And so we fight for you while you go run your business. We know you're not reading Politico day in and day out, right? You're not tracking legislation. You're not on your computer with how many bills you have flagged, several hundred
and
bills.
And when did you get that email, by the way? You got that email at night, you said, right? 6:30?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You didn't have to take that.
Yeah, believe me.
You don't want to spend your evenings reading legislative emails, right?
Right.
So we do that work for you on your behalf. Eileen is your voice in the State House. I'm your voice kind of directly to lawmakers. And again, all 50 states and in Washington.
And it's remarkable. This organization started in 1946. And because of that vision.
43.
And where did it start? What state or
it was
what region?
founded in California, and we have since relocated. Our headquarters are in Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh, nice. One of the biggest booming areas currently.
And cheaper than California.
Absolutely.
But I just think it's remarkable, I think it's remarkable that an organization with this kind of vision was able to get a federal tax deduction put into effect in 2017 to become permanent with everybody's great help. But that's just the classic example of the success of grassroots and participation.
Right.
So obviously the NFIB lobbyists in Washington, D.C. are fighting against this to expire, right? They want to keep it in place. Anything else from business owners that we can do other than maybe write to your legislator or
this is writing to your congressman.
So we have
congressperson, yes.
We have a website, smallbusinessdeduction.com. On that website, there is a petition that you can sign. We have we consistently deliver that petition to Congress. We actually were in DC this week at a huge press conference, and our CEO brought a stack of petitions a mile high and handed them off to Congress, and each page is a business owner who wants to make this deduction permanent. So the first thing you can do is sign that petition. Takes 30 seconds, easy peasy, and you do not need to be an NFIB member to sign. You just need to be a small business owner.
Okay, and what was that website? Or
smallbusinessdeduction.com.
Perfect.
Also on that website, we have an action alert, so you can send a personalized message directly to your members of Congress. Instead of just signing a mass petition, you can send to, your senator, your congressperson saying, we want this permanent and here's why. And you can personalize and share your own story. Those messages are particularly effective.
Right. So you could put your success story of why it needs to stay in place, or you could put on your unfortunate story of why it didn't work out for your business or what have you. And this is why you hope it stays for other businesses.
And we do hear both sides, right?
Yeah.
I have, for instance, 2 of my members that were in DC this week. One was able to stay open during COVID because of the deduction. He's got a few different locations, and the deduction floated one that wasn't doing as well as the others. One, without the deduction, would likely go out of business. And that's an unfortunate reality for the 30 million small business owners that rely on this deduction. That 20% could make or break them.
And let's face it, the guys that were able to stay afloat, that also kept how many families fed?
I think he's got 16 employees.
Right. So that's 16 families that lived on his shoulders, so to speak.
Absolutely. And we hear from members too that the deduction helps them give back to the community, right? We say all the time, look at your little league team. Look at your car wash for your local high school. The people that are sponsoring those events aren't your big guys, right? It's the small business owner giving back to the community. And so the more that we impact the small business's bottom line, that's fewer jobs, fewer local families that are being supported by small business, fewer dollars staying local and staying in that community. It impacts entire neighborhoods, right? It's not just one small business owner. It's the entire area in which you live.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more with you. And I thank you for having the lobbyists in Washington try to fight this bill. You brought something up earlier too about rising healthcare costs and inflation. Is the NFIB doing anything for us in Washington or even at the state level to try to minimize those costs?
Sure, I can share some broad scale, and then Eileen can get into some specifics for us. So every 4 years, NFIB releases what we call our small business problems and priorities. This is a pretty exhaustive list of issues facing small business owners, and our members rank them in order of this is the largest problem for me to this isn't really a problem for my small business. Healthcare consistently is the number one issue for small business owners, and 2024 was no exception. Healthcare came in as the largest problem for small business owners in this report. So we do have a dedicated lobbyist in Washington covering our healthcare portfolio, generally fighting for affordable healthcare coverage, flexible healthcare coverage, and competition in the market.
So in New Jersey, it's amazing because this is the one issue where there's agreement Small businesses agree, large businesses agree, labor unions agree, the government agrees, because remember, the government also provides health benefits to employees, that it's out of control. Healthcare costs are out of control. And there is much legislation that's being considered and looked at to try to reel in some of those costs. I think the direction we're moving now, it's really, so much of this comes from the middleman. It's not really from the pharmaceutical companies. It's not the doctors. It's not the hospitals. It's really the PBMs who are delivering the drugs that are really one of the sources of why our fees are all so high. So I would love to say that there's a magic wand and there's an answer out there. There's not a simple answer, but everybody continues to look at this carefully just to try to find out a way to control costs. Bre mentioned flexibility, which is so important, but then you can run into the situation where you opt for a policy as a small business owner in New Jersey because they are available that has a really high deductible. And then sadly, a family person or an employee gets ill and really has to use it. And then that's when you realize that your out of pocket is $5,000 or $10,000 for hospital visits. So it's such an important part of our life. And in some ways, we all, at different parts of the journey, we may have to ride a little bit insecure in that we're taking a risk that's saying, well, we're not buying the best policy because we can't afford it, but we're covered at least, so we have insurance
for bigger stuff.
For bigger stuff, yeah. It's a difficult issue.
Yeah. No, and I thank you for covering it to the best that we can talk about it here at the Hardscape Huddle. But I always feel to put our best foot forward as the employer, and I do advocate for healthcare for your crew and your employees. It's tax deductible, but you have to be able to.
That's important. I think a lot of small businesses forget that it's tax deductible. Business owners forget it's tax deductible.
But you just have to be willing to withstand the hurt every month when they take it out of your checking account for everybody. We're 13 or 14 people, and we do offer health care. It's how you get better labor. But again, you have to be able to withstand it. So if you can lessen the cost a little bit for that same policy, it really helps us out.
Absolutely.
How about inflation? Is there anything we can talk about on air that the NFIB is doing to fight inflation?
I think inflation, there's so many different variables as to why inflation is taking place that it's I think we could do a podcast just simply on inflation and how to and I see something looming on the horizons when there's various union struggles that you wonder, are we going to have another shutdown on supply deliveries, right?
Are you talking about the ports?
The ports. The ports, there's pressure at the ports to go on strike. And what will that do to our economy?
Is that just New Jersey ports or all ports?
That's just New Jersey.
Okay.
So it's a real New Jersey specific issue. I thought I would just point out some other silly things that are going on within the realm of human resources.
Sure.
Because as you said, your wife is your HR person. Very, very common small businesses. You wear so many different hats. There are bills in our legislature right now. I started talking earlier that when a bill is released from committee, there's two houses. There's the Assembly, the Senate. The bills have to pass in Senate committee. Sometimes they get referred to a second committee, which is great because it kills time, because you want to, sadly with bad bills, you're constantly delaying them. And then ultimately a bill goes to the Senate for a full vote. Same thing in the Assembly. Bill goes to the Assembly in committee, then the floor of the Assembly, it's voted. The Senate bill and the Assembly bill have to be the same, then they go to the governor. So there are many different stop places along the process where you have a chance to put in your opinion. So the bills, I'm going to discuss about three bills that are out there, and they all are in the process. They've moved. I
want to jump in a little bit more on the process. A lot of our work is defensive in New Jersey. We are a nonpartisan organization. We don't care which party is introducing bad legislation. If it's bad for business, we're against it. Yeah. Right. And so Eileen's going to talk about some pieces of legislation.
Basically, that thought is common sense.
Yes. Yeah. So Eileen's going to talk about some legislation that we might not be trying to get passed because it's good for business, but we're trying to stop because it would be bad for business. And that in this state, unfortunately, is a lot of what we're doing is preventing things from getting worse.
And I'm not going to bother with bill numbers because you're not going to remember. It's silly. I'm just going to do concepts. So this bill was just in committee, and it requires an employer, when you find somebody you want to hire, you have to give them a report. You're making an offer to hire, but at the same time, you have to give them a report outlining their eligibility for leave under various government.
Before you hired them?
Yeah, while you're hiring them, you have to give them this report. So whether it's temporary disability, family leave to take care of a loved one, maternity leave. There's just a list of things that you're going to be required to explain. So I testified and just explained that this is just not fair to a small business person. We don't have HR departments. This takes research. And then the next person to testify behind me was somebody that I would say was from a very progressive, left-leaning group. And I said, oh, great. She's just going to she's going to flatten everything I said because she's going after me. And she started out saying, yes, this is a brilliant idea. It's fabulous. It's great. But an employer, and coming from her, it made a different soundbite than coming from me. But an employer doesn't have not only does the employer not have the resources, but this information can't be shared with the employer. They don't know.
Right.
But you have to work a little bit before you know what your eligibility is for leave. So I think that bill, I without major amendments, I believe that bill is dead. There's another bill that is I'm going to call this the failure to notify of promotions. So if you are looking for somebody new to bring into your organization and you don't share with your current employees that they are eligible for this job opening and it would be a promotion, you as the employer could be fined $1,000 for every violation. And that would be violation per employee. So really, if you have 7 employees, in theory, you could receive a $7,000 violation because you didn't tell any of your other employees. Well, how about as the business owner, you know your staff, you're a small business, and you know that what you want, you don't see that in your current employees, that you need somebody who is to step it up.
Or just a different skill set.
Right.
Yeah. So crazy, right? This is
that makes no common sense.
No. There is another bill that
who thinks of these things? Like
maybe our legislators don't sleep. They call this.
Maybe they need it to be before they can run for office, and it'll never happen. They need to be a business owner.
Right. They have all of these assumptions about what business owners do, what's available to you. And some of these pieces of legislation get so in the weeds that we live and breathe this stuff and it's hard for us to understand, right? And then they expect it to be just common sense for a business owner to pick up, say, and then, this report's easy peasy, here you go, employee. And then
be willing to fine us because we didn't know. Oh, well, that was your stupidity. You should have known this.
There's another bill, and it's called, and remember, these bills have had hearings. I mean, they're out there. It's called Stopping Ghost Jobs. So apparently there's jobs on websites that have already been filled, but they're still, if you went to a website, you could find such a job. And if the posting is left up, there's a penalty against the employer. So it calls for the employer to know every third party that has posted the job that they're trying to fill. And it also has a monetary penalty attached to it if it's found to have these jobs out there And then I came up with a scenario of, well, what if you're hiring, the way the bill's written, if you're hiring 2 people for the same, you have 2 openings, same position, and you fill one position, the way the bill's written, you'd have to make sure the job posting is
comes down, and then you have to repost it.
Yes, and then you'd have to repost it. So just silly. And
so let me ask a dumb question.
There's no dumb question when it comes to legislation.
Yeah, good point. I think you're right. So we maybe need legislation for extra hours in the day. I mean, how are we going to get that passed? Because if you need us to do all of this work in my business, pay the taxes on time, pay some, work hard enough to possibly pay an additional 20% taxes, where do I find all this time? You might have your employees might have some free time, because we have another piece of legislation called the heat stress bill.
Oh my goodness.
And this bill in particular is being driven by the labor unions. There's a union in New Jersey called Safe Roads. It's funded by the Service Employees International Union. And anytime there is a session, when the legislature's in Trenton, these group of activists are there promoting the heat bill. And it will call for whenever the temperature hits 80 degrees and above.
80.
A nice day in New Jersey, right?
Yeah.
Indoors, this is indoors and outdoors. You will have to give your employees hourly rests so they can stop work. You'll have to have water available.
At a certain temperature.
It requires a written plan. Every business will have to have a written plan that outlines what your procedures are to address heat stress.
And did you say this was a New Jersey bill or a federal bill?
Oh, this is New Jersey.
It's New Jersey. It's been proposed in a few other states as well.
And union driven. And
so
I personally think the rationale for unions to promote this is because they want to go after the warehouse jobs, and they want to go after the Amazons and the Walmarts.
That's a very good point too.
Yes.
And hence the indoor outdoor. But if they get this bill, what's the likelihood, first of all?
I think for right now, we're coasting. I think we're good now until maybe next June, and we'll see what happens. But
they'll push it when it's hot.
Yeah, exactly. But there are enough legislators who are opposed to this. But with that said, anything can happen. And I do know that every organization is working to stop this. So the farm workers.
Good point.
Unions have already worked out a deal because they are going to be exempt because they have collective bargaining agreements. So there's language that if you have a collective bargaining agreement, this doesn't even impact you.
Right.
Yeah, but for our business as a small business owner,
this is a total hit.
All the landscapers, all the masons, that means we can't build your house because it's too hot out.
Auto workers, construction workers.
Right.
We even heard from somebody who has a kosher bakery, and I don't understand all of the dynamics there, but to keep it kosher, it has to be above a certain temperature. She can't use certain pieces of equipment.
The bread won't rise properly.
Sure. So it has to be a certain temperature. If it's over 80, or if it has to be under 80, or her workers are having to take a break, she can't operate her business, right? And so that's really what we fight for, is your right to grow, own, and operate your business.
So they could take the tax money too.
True.
but honestly, the heat bill is a real issue because it has a funding. It's being funded.
There's funding behind it, right?
Exactly.
So guys, please, if you're tuning in, just listen to that bill. That stops us in our tracks. Up and down the East Coast, Florida for sure. I mean, heck, in Florida. Well, this is a New Jersey bill, so I apologize.
New Jersey, but as Bre said, it's
got traction in a few other states as well. Yeah,
because of the unions.
Which is another thing really that's helpful with a national organization is it's very funny because we'll hear that a bill, it's usually California introduces a bad bill, and then next thing you know,
New York and New Jersey.
Exactly.
I'll call my colleague who covers California and ask him, hey, what are you seeing this year? Because we're going to see it next cycle. We're going to see it in two legislations from now. As
a native New Jerseyan, I'm not proud of that we follow suit with California. I'll be honest with you.
Totally agree.
So I
love California to visit, but I agree.
But I think that is why you see businesses and people fleeing those, those places as well.
We do see a lot of that, unfortunately. Yeah, I've got members almost every day say, this is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, whether it's the heat stress bill, whether it's the taxes being risen, whether it's, another piece, another regulation, another report they have to fill out. It seems business owners really cannot shoulder any more than they are currently shouldering. And we understand that it's a lot. You guys wear so many hats, and going back to your, how do we legislate more hours in the day? We understand you physically do not have time to cover a lot of these things. Yeah. And so it's almost a hard ask for us to ask business owners, okay, can you take more time to contact your lawmakers? Can you take more time to, go to Trenton? Can you take more time to talk to us and explain your struggles? But at the end of the day, it's too important not to.
And that's the investment in your business.
Exactly.
Right. Like, to keep your business afloat, you're going to have to take out an hour a day or an hour a week or a month to fill out that survey or cast your vote. Like, no, I don't want this bill. This makes no sense. It's,
And Bre sets the program up, the software system. She writes really the problem, and she sets it up so you can insert that into your business, and it's a very simple process.
Yeah,
we
try to make it as easy as possible because we know you guys are struggling, and we know that time is probably your most valuable resource.
What I really like about the emails that I get, everything is in layman terms. It's easy. Listen, I'm not a senator, a legislator. I never studied law or any of that. So I don't have that verbiage to speak eloquently about law and legislation.
Kyle, sorry, you'd make a great legislator.
I was going to say, you need to give yourself a little bit more credit there, Kyle.
We need more small business owners in our legislature.
Absolutely.
You would do a wonderful job.
Yeah,
so don't cut yourself short.
Well, thank you for the kind words, but I don't know that the legislation would like what I had to say all the time, Again, it goes back. Now, another asset that I see from the NFIB is you have localized representatives too. So I have a gentleman, maybe Howard.
Walter,
him too.
Yeah.
He comes in, and when there's something really important, he just brings it to my desk. And, my sales associates who kind of screen everybody before they get into our office, they do a great job. And Walter's quick to say, look, you need to take a look at this. And I'll say, well, I didn't open Bre's email yet or what have you. So you need to do it. It's happening today, and we need your vote on it, whether it's pro or con. But so that's a resource. And now, how are they throughout the state? Is there many, or is it just Walter, or...
Yeah, so you're speaking about, I think, our sales representatives who kind of develop that first touch relationship with our members on the ground. We do have several throughout New Jersey. They work specific territories, so most of them reside in the localities in which they work. So they really do kind of get that hyper local. But we have regular meetings with our sales team.
We have one
on Wednesday. And so at those meetings, Eileen will kind of brief all the folks in the field, what we call it, the people that are kind of going business to business. She'll brief them on everything that we've talked about today. I'll share any advocacy activities we have live. And then they will go to your business. You can call them up. Most of them are super personable. We've got just a fantastic team in New Jersey that really, I think, cares and values the business owner.
Is on the website, the NFIB website, can they look up to see who their local sales rep is to contact them directly?
I'm actually not sure.
I don't. Okay. I don't think so.
I'm not certain about that. Yeah. If you had someone specifically reach out, you can send them to me, and I can get them to wherever they need to go.
But if you do go on our site, they do give you a phone number for NFIB, so you can definitely
put them in the right
direction.
Way.
Yeah. One of my favorite things about working for this company, if I can get a little personal, is truly the people here are just phenomenal. Everyone on our team shares a vision of just supporting small business. And so if you call pretty much anyone in NFIB and you're not the person they're supposed to talk to, they will work to get you to the right contact. We all share a vision, share a mission, and share really truly a love of small business and a desire to support small business. So if somebody does reach out and they're like, I don't know where to go, we can take care of them.
Gotcha.
Bre, why don't you talk maybe a little? I don't think we mentioned our legal center.
Sure. Yeah. I'm going to refer to some notes here a little bit. So we do have two other resources we haven't really touched on.
Sure.
One is our Small Business Legal Center, and one is our Small Business Research Center. Excuse me. So these are subsidiaries of NFIB. The Legal Center does what you would expect. It fights for small business in the courts. This is, you know, we occasionally will sue the federal government if they pass something that we view as unconstitutional and terrible for small business owners. We will write amicus briefs for things that we think would be helpful for small business owners. If a small business owner is having an issue, they can consult with one of our lawyers. We typically do not get involved in individual litigation, but we do have 3 attorneys on staff that can talk through a potential issue with a business owner.
Mm-hmm. What do I do in this predicament?
Exactly. I actually had somebody call me yesterday who's a contractor, and they are under the New Jersey Department of Labor has been investigating how they're paying their taxes for now going on 11 months, and asked them to sign on for to allow this to go on for an additional 5 months. And I was not acting as the attorney, but just listening. And so the suggestion I offered was, we'll tell them that any penalties that are agreed upon, if there are any penalties in the end, that interest stops per the date the investigation started. Because you shouldn't take so long to investigate somebody. I mean, that's horrible. A year
right,
and
then you
a half.
dictate what I pay in interest?
Right. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's always, we're here. You can bounce your issues off of us, and we'll offer you ideas, and we'll put you in the right direction.
Correct. Yeah. And then one other resource is our small.
And are they located in Trenton?
They're located in DC.
Oh,
They're
okay.
housed in DC. The attorneys are. I don't think both of them live in DC. I think one lives in Michigan. Doesn't matter. They all share a phone number and an email address, and are all incredibly competent and can speak to you about an issue, help guide, help direct.
Okay.
Another resource is our Small Business Research Center. So if you ever see NFIB cited on, Fox Business or any of the investment shows, typically CNBC, typically you're getting information from our research center. So this center compiles narratives from small business owners, like the problems and priorities I mentioned earlier, where our small business owners are ranking what's most important to their business. They release that report, but they also release our small business optimism index. So this is the outlook of small business owners. How optimistic do you feel about business? It's been at a historic low since COVID. It has been ticking up, which is good to see. But that's a monthly report where you can kind of get the pulse of how the small business community is feeling.
Well, that's interesting. And that's a great topic right in itself. I mean, we could do a whole episode on that.
Right.
So we're pretty fortunate to talk to a lot of different contractors, from the mason to the hardscaper to the landscaper. And from what we have seen is some of the small to medium projects have dried up, right? Like the middle class is feeling the pinch the worst, and they've decided to put their excess spending on hold a little bit currently.
Right.
They're a little bit wishy-washy on what to do with their money. So it looks better in their bank account than in ours.
The short-term benefits of COVID are over, because especially for outdoor construction and home remodeling, when people were at home and not going to work, everybody and saving money because there was no money to spend on being entertaining yourself, traveling. As you know, people did at-home projects, and now with the interest rates climbing so high, it's changed. We're in that saving mode. So sincerely, I hope as interest rates come down, it loosens things up. But feel the pain of.
Yeah, we just got to get through it, right?
Yeah.
We got to grin and bear it this second. Or what's your feelings on the interest rates? Are they going to come down again before the election, or you think they stay the same?
I think they stay the same until after the election.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So
I'm not an economist. I'm not
yeah,
gonna
we'll wait and see what the spring brings.
Yeah.
To continue to kind of beat the drum on the importance of the small business deduction, I was referring to my notes because I wanted to give you the exact statistic. We found that 44% of small business owners would postpone or completely cancel any sort of capital gains investment should this deduction go away. So just as you were saying, money looks better in their bank accounts than in yours. Almost half of business owners agree with you there. We just to throw out a couple other statistics, 59% of small business owners would said that the removal of this deduction would have a negative impact on their business. 61% said they would raise prices, and 36%, so a little over a third, would actually postpone or cancel hiring additional employees.
You touched on two great things right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now I don't have this extra 20% deduction that I can write off.
Raising prices.
Who pays for that?
Right.
I can't absorb all of that, right? So now I have to raise the price. So guess what? You as the end user now pay a higher price.
And the consumer can't always pay that price,
right.
Especially if you're talking about your business, right? It's a specialty product. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily need to redo your hardscape. Right. So then your business takes a huge hit because people are seeing those inflated prices across the board, and they're having to spend on milk and eggs at the grocery store, or they're having to spend on a car repair that they absolutely need. It's critical for them to get to and from work. Some of this discretionary spending goes away, and small businesses like yours see the brunt of that hit.
Right. So, and then here again too, right now my business slows, mm-hmm. or any seasonal business, doesn't have to be construction related. Mm-hmm. Any seasonal business, mm-hmm. we're down here at the shore. So what do they do with their labor? Mm-hmm. They lay them off. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'd love to see a jobs report come out very shortly of how many layoffs there's been in the last 30 to 60 days. I know in our business, people are laying off pretty hard right here in this region. And, they're cutting 20, 30%. So unfortunately, that it's the trickle down effect that we all talk about.
And those numbers are available. So we will definitely see.
Yeah. But you guys also put on a educational podcast as well, do you not?
We do, yeah. Education is one of the most important things we do at NFIB. We've got a series of educational resources for our members. We actually do a monthly webinar. We have an Ask the CPA webinar where folks can come on and ask a tax accountant their questions. But we also have our own podcast called The Small Business Rundown. It's released bi-weekly on Thursdays, available wherever you get your podcasts. And it's
Spotify.
Spotify,
YouTube.
Apple, and on our website as well. If you just Google NFIB podcast or Small Business Rundown, you'll see it. But it's a great amalgam of our staff, other experts and professionals, and small business owners that are members of ours, talking about everything from taxes, inflation, healthcare, workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, pretty much any small business issue you can imagine. Or some of our more educational episodes are things that might be forthcoming. So one that I found particularly helpful was on this beneficial ownership idea in the federal government, where small businesses would have to report anyone who has some sort of stake in their business, some decision-making power. You're about to have to report that information to the federal government.
Why?
Great question. I don't have an answer for you. It is something that NFIB's legal center is involved on. We do have a case live trying to repeal this act. But I think something like 80% of small business owners don't know that this exists. And so we used...
Okay. Time out. Can we just back it up a minute?
Yeah.
So anybody that has a decision-making ability mm-hmm. in my company, mm-hmm. I have to report
a 25% stake decision-making ability.
Okay.
Very vague. That does not mean 25% ownership. That does not mean 25%, stake. That could be you own a restaurant and your restaurant manager is the one making your day-to-day decisions.
Right, where we're purchasing our meats and all the produce.
You have to report that.
Wow.
So 80% of business owners don't know that this exists, right? So we used our podcast to do an entire episode explaining it, explaining how to comply, and explaining what we're doing to try to repeal that act. So if you're interested in kind of getting more into the weeds on pieces of legislation, small business issues, or just, misery loves company, want to commiserate with someone, the Small Business Rundown really is a great resource.
NFIB puts a lot of time into voting records. So before an election, whether it's federal or whether it's state, In New Jersey, our assembly is going to be up for election in November of 2025. We put together a voting record of we'll pick key issues, and then score how each member voted, and we'll come up with a report card, and it obviously steers the small business person to look at who votes in the best interest of small businesses. So that's a really fun tool just to take a look at, to remind you voting matters. It's important to vote for federal and state legislators who understand what it's like to be a small business person. And the other component of that is NFIB also has a political action committee. And a political action committee is voluntary, but small businesses can contribute. And it's a way for NFIB to reward, because we all know that giving dollars to anybody running for office is perfectly legal. It's a part of our system because running for office is really expensive, whether it's lawn signs or whether it's trying to get an ad on the radio or the television. Extremely expensive to run for office. So we like to get involved in the political race and give contributions to candidates who are like-minded. So I just do a little shout out for
absolutely
our PAC here in New Jersey.
Well, we appreciate it. As a small business owner in Ocean County, we appreciate everything the NFIB does. You know, it's and we got to get more like-minded people together, and it doesn't matter who they vote for. It's just we need them to make common sense decisions.
Right. I say all the time, our party is small business. I don't care if you have an R behind your name, a D behind your name, an I behind your name. Doesn't matter. You're either voting with small business or you're not.
Any other topics that we need to address for near future?
I think we hit on my hot buttons.
Okay, so taxes is huge. We've got to get out and vote to keep this bill in place for 2025, so not to let it expire. New Jersey has a ban bill on gas-powered leaf blowers. I would assume it's lawnmowers as well, or
yes, lawnmowers as well. We also, by the way, have legislation to ban for all new building anything that is non-electric. So so no more gas stoves, no more gas heat.
Regular household, not commercial.
Not commercial, right? To ban it across the board. And then we also have a proactive legislator who said this is ridiculous, and there's also legislation that says all diversified energy products will be allowed anywhere.
So that's a little different, right? Yeah. So going back to the mowers, I mean, what about all of these landscape companies, okay, and all of the HOAs that hire these companies that buy lawnmowers on a commercial end, and the listeners know better than I.
They're very expensive.
$13,000-$15,000 I hear, but it probably goes bigger than that,
right?
And I don't know how long they
What's
last,
the life?
Right?
And there's also legislators don't even understand the consequences of the batteries involved with the leaf blowers,
right?
Because we haven't in New Jersey, and NFIB does promote clean energy and green ideas, but you have to balance it in a
sustainable, affordable way.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Good word.
Yeah.
Affordable, sustainable. I like those words. But we in New Jersey, as a state, we haven't even figured out what to do with these batteries,
right?
Because the
how
batteries,
do we get rid of them when they die?
Right, because they have a short life. They're not.
Well, and what's to stop somebody from just going across the border into Pennsylvania, picking up gas-powered lawnmowers and bringing them back and supporting the economy of a different state, right? That's money outside of your state, outside of your local economy.
Well, we can think of it globally too, right? So they're all lithium-ion batteries, right? Well, where do we mine it? Okay, it's not in the United States.
Not in the United States. No.
And I get we don't want to keep ruining our planet, but if we're gonna make money off of it, we might as well. I think is it Wisconsin or Minnesota, somewhere up there supposedly has a lot of whatever we need to make these batteries. Okay, I think it's uranium, maybe. I'm not exactly sure.
They don't want us digging on their land,
right? Well, we should make that money back, that capital. I mean, why not us? Because we don't have the child labor. We have child labor laws, and we'd rather send that money overseas. That makes no sense to me.
But I think the short of it is that we're highlighting why these clean energy goals that are supposed to go into effect in 2030 don't make any sense, because we haven't figured out the pieces to the jigsaw puzzle. And I think you hit on a good point. I think everybody wants a sustainable world future.
Of course.
Our environment is so precious to us, but it's just got to be reasonable.
Sure. The idea sounds great on paper, right? And then you get into the execution and how do we actually make this happen? And it's a big question mark.
And landscapers, the guys that are taking care of your lawns, the guys that are putting in the plants, making your yard, giving you good curb appeal, they want sustainable too. That's their living, right? I mean, if they can, you got a mosquito problem. So instead of spraying Roundup or whatever, they plant different plants to keep the mosquitoes away. I mean, that's sustainable, right? These guys want that.
Exactly.
But if you're going to impact their business and tell them what they have to buy, where they have to buy it, how to get rid of this, give them a $750 registration tax, at what point do they just say, the heck with it?
Yeah. And I really think it's real. People just get, business owners, residents, we get fed up and say, I got to get out of this state. I love New Jersey, but something's got to give.
And then you lose out on taxes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And one of the best things you can do, again, is to contact your lawmakers and tell them that, right?
Okay.
I'm sure every night you go home and you tell your wife, I'm sick of this, I'm sick of that. Tell your legislator. I mean, your wife wants to hear it too. I'm sure she's very supportive.
No, she's probably tired of hearing it by now.
But tell your member of Congress, tell your local assembly person, tell your senator, because the more that they hear that, and then just the greater amount of messages that they receive, especially if it's a personal story and you can say, look, I own a hardscaping business, I employ however many employees. You're putting their livelihood at risk. You're putting their families at risk. You're putting my community at risk. And the more they can hear that, and the more often they just continue to receive those messages, they really do take notice. It does make a difference. It might seem really inconsequential. It might seem like, one more thing I got to do. But we've got 300,000 members across the U.S. If all 300,000 members emailed Congress today and said, hey, stop this small business tax hike, save this 20% deduction, they would be forced to pay attention to that, right? Same thing in New Jersey. The more business owners we have telling our legislators what they're doing that's helpful, what they're doing that's hurtful, the better.
I'm going to jump into just a story from New Jersey about when we're talking sustainability. Everybody agreed there's too many bags being wasted in New Jersey. Too many bags.
Plastic bags.
So what did we do? We banned plastic bags and paper bags at food stores. We banned everything. So as you know, you go to the food store, you got to bring your own bag with you. And there's exceptions. You can have plastic bags for your produce and for your newspaper if your newspaper is delivered. Right. But the piece of this legislation, it allows for anybody who gets their groceries delivered every week. I like to go to the food store. I don't like going to the food store, but it's easier for me to go myself.
And you pick what you want.
And I pick what I want. But I do know people who never go to the food store anymore. And I kid you not, hundreds and hundreds of bags they have. And these are the bags that our landfills cannot take. It would take 20 years for each of these bags to decompose.
I have probably 200 of them in the trunk of my car right now because I travel a lot. So I do grocery delivery.
Yeah.
And I recycle paper bags. I recycle plastic bags. I don't know what to do.
Well, you can, if you have those bags, you can bring them to a food bank.
Oh, that's good to know.
Food banks can accept them.
But I wrap gifts in them, birthday gifts.
Yeah. But it's just classic because the plan didn't work, and we can't. The legislature has not gone back yet and fixed it.
Right, great on paper. No idea on implementation.
How about on straws? Can we get back to real straws, or nothing in place for that?
I think plastic straws are gone. I think that page has turned. The next part of that is there's legislation now to ban plastic knives, forks, cutlery. So that won't be allowed. And then there was just a new bill. So
goodbye spork.
Yeah.
Well, they can make them still out of wood, bamboo or something
recycled,
compostable, right?
Right. So there's now a bill that if you do DoorDash, because if you do DoorDash, it's going to your house usually, right?
Yeah.
Right. they're not delivering it to you. Let's hope they're not delivering it to your car. And that at your home, you probably have metal cutlery. And so DoorDash will not be allowed to include plastic cutlery anymore.
It almost seems like we're not a free country.
We're moving in a different direction.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you ladies were able to come into studio today and just enlighten us on some of the bills that are, sensible, and some of them, most of them, that aren't as sensible or common sense. We need to get the taxes fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Cutlery, I don't know if I agree or disagree. I don't know if I even have an opinion on it. But
also, always looking for ideas that are pro-business. As Bre said earlier, we're always on the defense.
Mm-hmm.
It would be really nice to be on the offense. So this week I had a member get in touch with me who is a notary and has a UPS store. So independently owned, but part of the UPS chain. And sure enough, he sent me this great chart that I can pull up the what he is allowed to charge as a notary. He's only allowed to charge $2.50. If it's a real estate transaction, you can charge as high as $25. But for him, this in other states it's $10. Right. So for him, this just seems. Why can't we raise the rate of being a notary? And I think that's a good small business issue. So we're going to look at developing some legislation to take it the fees for a notary to this century.
Yeah, everything we do comes directly from the mouths of small business owners. We do not take a stand unless we hear from our members that we need to take a stand on something, and the majority agree we should either support or oppose. So your listeners, if anyone has issues, problems, suggestions they want to bring to our attention, we are always happy to chat. Our information's online, NFIB.com. If you get questions, feel free to forward them my way as well.
Yeah.
But we love doing stuff like this. Thank you again just so much for having us today. But if anyone needs anything, we really are here to be a resource. We are here to fight for small business.
And Kyle, we're just grateful that you invited us here today, and we look forward to meeting members of your chain because we're always looking for new members to participate to help our grassroots
well, it's only
organization
going to help
grow.
Themselves.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Again, it goes back to it's an investment into your business.
It absolutely is.
So it's the give back kind of sort of, But that's the questions I had to ask today. You ladies did a great job, and again, I thank you very much for your time. I know you guys come from probably an hour and a half away. You come over from Trenton, so thank you. Hopefully Trenton didn't implode without you. But thank you for tuning in to the Hardscape Huddle. I was your host, Kyle Staffa, and we're going to thank the NFIB ladies, NFIB.com. Tune into their podcast to get some more education. We'll see you next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.